anytime you have a leak of documents, from any country, uh, including the US or the UK, yes, it's a matter of concern because that can be highly sensitive information that is revealed, including to those who are your adversaries. But my starting point here, and I think it should be the starting point for everyone, to be honest, is be careful. Be very careful. While US officials acknowledge that there was a leak of material, some of these documents, perhaps many of them, have been altered, and they've been altered to spread disinformation. So whether you're talking about the issue of whether there have been British special forces inside Ukraine, whether you talk about whether Egypt was considering providing aid to Russia in its aggression against Ukraine, whether you talk about US relations with South Korea, or indeed US relations with the UN or with the UK, uh, it's in certain people's interest to spread discord. And so the starting point is you verify. You see if what the claim documents are saying, what the claims that are being made in the media are, have any type of corroborating evidence at this point, and you do that on a case by case basis. And as you should do responsibly with any type of information that is put before you, even if this happened to come from some of the more obscure parts of the internet, at least
Mm.
for most of our listeners today.
So I guess the question that you're presenting is the authenticity of these leaks. I mean, as you said, in the US, they have acknowledged the leaks, but how do we know? Because of course these are, they're top secret files, classified as secret. How do we know how real they are as they're being presented to us in these leaks? I mean, do we have any idea at the moment where they came from?
First of all, in terms of where they came from, no, we don't. The documents were simply reproduced, in some case, again, crude versions of them, on what's called 4chan, which is a place where you're more likely to find people spreading conspiracy theories, and on Discord, which is something where you're more likely to find people talking about video gaming. So it's an unusual place to occur, and it occurred more than a month ago. The media didn't notice this documents for weeks. In terms of the authenticity, well, I'll give you one immediate test case. Some of the documents purportedly talk about what the US says are the casualty numbers in Russia's aggression in Ukraine. And they have quite clearly been altered. You can actually see physical evidence that they've been altered. More importantly, the alteration was done to minimize the casualty figures amongst Russian forces and to maximize, to inflate them amongst Ukrainian forces. In other words, it was kind of a crude effort at disinformation to say that
Mm.
Ukraine is the one that's suffering, these military losses in the Russian aggression, and that that in fact is approaching defeat. There are other documents where the claims are perhaps more subtle and the disinformation is more subtle, and so you have to go back and say, for example, look, is it really true that Ukrainian forces are suffering severe shortages of air defense and indeed of equipment, which would jeopardize any counteroffensive later this year? And that's something where I could take you step by step in terms of the spin and then the reality of the situation.
Okay, I mean, Scott, you and I have talked many times about the war in Ukraine and the tactics by Russia. Moscow has denied being the source of these leaks. Do you doubt that?
I don't know who the source is.
Hmm.
I honestly don't know who the source is. I can tell you that what we can put together is that someone took um, photographs of documents which appear to have been used at a U.S. briefing. Now, whether it was a U.S. briefing just of U.S. agencies, whether it was of NATO allies, um, there have been claims that it was from a briefing in Germany at a high-level meeting of the U.S. and international partners. That's a starting point to consider who the source might be. Um, there is spin which is being put out, including by a student, British University student, who's mentioned in the Times this morning, that well, maybe these documents were put out by the U.S. intelligence agencies themselves. Some type of real, deep cover, deep state operation. Something which, on the face of it, appears absurd,
Hmm.
given that most of the claims in the documents are being spun to try to sow discord between the U.S. and its allies. So what I would tell you is, again, responsibly, no, there's no evidence at this point that this was a high level US operation, nor is there any evidence at this point that the initial leak was a high level Kremlin operation, but there is evidence that the Kremlin is using this leak to put out its political lines. including the line this morning where it says, "Oh, well, this shows that the U.S. has been trying to dish dirt on the UN Secretary General."